Captain Lisa Phoenix Rodriguez stood outside the Flight Operations Building at Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington, watching the gray Pacific Northwest clouds roll across the tarmac. Rain drummed against the windows of the Boeing C-17 Globemaster III parked nearby, $70 million of military transport aircraft that she wasn't allowed to touch. "Rodriguez!" The voice belonged to Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, her commanding officer, whose perpetual scowl had deepened over the 6 months since she'd been assigned to his unit. "My office, now." Lisa straightened her flight suit and followed him inside, past the mission boards covered with deployment schedules and maintenance reports. Other pilots glanced up from their briefing materials, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed relief that they weren't in her position. Webb's office was spartanly decorated, military certificates, squadron photos, and a single personal item, a framed picture of him shaking hands with the Secretary of Defense. He didn't invite her to sit. "Rodriguez, I've been reviewing your file again," he said, tossing a manila folder onto his desk. "Graduated top of your class from pilot training. Excellent marks in all technical areas. Perfect safety record in smaller aircraft." Lisa remained at attention. "Yes, sir. But you've been here 6 months and I still haven't signed off on your C-17 certification. Want to know why?" She knew, better than to answer. Webb was going to tell her anyway. Because flying a C-17 isn't about book learning or simulator hours. It's about instinct, about making split-second decisions with 200 troops in the back depending on you to get them home alive. It's about having the physical and mental strength to handle an aircraft that weighs 585,000 pounds fully loaded. "Sir, with respect, I've logged over 300 hours in the simulator without a single. Simulators don't have consequences, Captain." Webb's voice cut through her response like a blade. "When you're flying into a combat zone at night, in bad weather, with surface-to-air missiles painting your aircraft, the simulator doesn't help you. Experience does, instinct does, and frankly, I'm not convinced you have what it takes." The unfairness of it burned in Lisa's chest, but she kept her expression neutral. She had heard variations of this speech from instructors throughout her career, always. The same themes, always the same doubts about her capabilities. "Sir, how can I gain experience if I'm not allowed to fly the aircraft?" Webb leaned back in his chair. "There's a reason why 98% of C-17 pilots are men, Rodriguez. This isn't a gender bias thing. It's about physical and mental demands that, frankly, most women can't handle." The door to Webb's office opened, and Major Sarah Chen entered without knocking. As the squadron's operations officer, she was one of the few people who could get away with such informality. "Colonel, we have a problem," Chen said, her face tense. "Captain Morrison just called in sick, food poisoning. He was supposed to fly the supply run to McMurdo Station tomorrow." McMurdo Station. Lisa knew the mission. A critical supply flight. To the U.S. Antarctic Research Base, carrying everything from medical supplies to equipment needed for ongoing scientific research. It was a challenging flight over some of the most remote and dangerous terrain on Earth. "What about Henderson?" Webb asked. "Already deployed to Qatar. Williams is on leave, and Thompson is grounded for maintenance training." Webb ran his hand through his graying hair. "Damn! McMurdo is expecting that cargo. The research season is ending soon, and they need those supplies before the Antarctic winter sets in." Lisa saw her opportunity. "Sir, I could fly the mission." Both Webb and Chen turned to look at her as if she had suggested flying to Mars. "Absolutely not," Webb said immediately. "McMurdo is one of the most challenging destinations in military aviation. Extreme weather, limited landing options, no room for error. Sir, I've studied the approach procedures extensively. The weather forecast shows a clear window tomorrow afternoon, and I have more instrument flying hours than most pilots in the squadron. Studying procedures and executing them are two different things, Captain." Major Chen cleared her throat. "Colonel, with respect, we don't have many options. The cargo includes medical supplies that McMurdo urgently needs. If we delay the mission, People could be at risk. Webb stared at Lisa for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Rodriguez, if I authorize this mission, you'll have a full crew, experienced loadmaster, navigator, flight engineer. They'll be watching every move you make. I understand, sir. One mistake, one single mistake, and you'll be flying a desk for the rest of your career. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. Webb pulled out a mission briefing folder and slammed it onto his desk. Fine, but you're taking Captain Brooks as your co-pilot. He's got more Antarctic experience than anyone in this squadron. Captain Jake Brooks was known throughout the unit as one of the most skilled pilots on base, with 15 years of experience flying everything from fighters to transports. He was also known for his old-school attitudes about women in aviation. Sir, I'd prefer to select my own co-pilot. This isn't a negotiation, Rodriguez. Brooks goes with you, or you don't go at all. Lisa nodded. Yes, sir. I'll review the mission briefing and begin preparations immediately. As she turned to leave, Webb's voice stopped her. Rodriguez, I want you to understand something. I'm not setting you up to fail, but McMurdo isn't the place to prove a point. If you have any doubts about your ability to handle this mission, speak up now. Lisa met his gaze steadily. No doubts, sir. I'll get the cargo to McMurdo safely. An hour later, she sat in the squadron briefing room with Captain Brooks, reviewing weather reports and flight plans. Brooks was a compact man in his 40s, with premature grey hair and the confident bearing of someone who had seen everything military aviation could throw at him. So, Rodriguez, he said without looking up from his charts. First time to Antarctica? Yes, sir. It's not like anywhere else you've flown. The weather can change in minutes. The magnetic compass is useless near the South Pole, and if something goes wrong, the nearest help is thousands of miles away. I've done my homework, Captain. I know the challenges. Brooks finally looked at her directly. Homework doesn't keep you alive down there. Experience does, instinct does, and the ability to make hard decisions under pressure. Lisa felt like she was having the same conversation she'd had with Webb, just with different words. Captain, I'm qualified to fly this mission. My record speaks for itself. Your record is flying cargo runs to friendly airfields with full ground support. McMurdo is different. It's a place where mistakes kill people. The weather briefer, a young sergeant named Martinez, interrupted their conversation. Captains, I have an updated forecast for tomorrow's flight window. He pulled up satellite imagery on the briefing room screen. The good news is that the weather system that's been hammering McMurdo is moving out. You should have clear skies and minimal wind for the approach. What's the bad news? Brooks asked. There's another system moving in from the Ross Sea. If your flight is delayed for any reason, you could be looking at severe weather and possible closure of the airfield. Lisa studied the weather patterns, calculating timing and fuel requirements. Sergeant, what's our window? You need to be on. Approach no later than 1400 local time. After that, conditions deteriorate rapidly. Brooks closed his flight manual. Rodriguez, I hope you're a better pilot than most people think you are, because tomorrow we're going to find out. As the briefing ended, Lisa walked out to the flight line and looked at the C-17 she would be flying tomorrow. In the fading daylight, the massive aircraft looked both beautiful and intimidating. 4 powerful engines, a cargo bay that could hold a tank, and the capability to land on rough airstrips anywhere in the world. Tomorrow she would finally get her chance to prove that she belonged in the cockpit of one of the military's most capable aircraft. But as she stood there in the cold Washington rain, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was waiting for her to fail. The C-17's engines wound up with a throaty roar as Lisa completed her pre-flight checklist at 800 hours. The massive cargo bay behind her was loaded with 40,000 pounds of supplies, medical equipment, food, fuel, and scientific instruments that McMurdo Station desperately needed before the Antarctic winter closed the research season. All systems "A green," reported Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, the flight engineer. Santos was a 20-year veteran who had flown missions over Iraq, Afghanistan, and half the world's trouble spots. Her presence on the crew was both reassuring and intimidating. Captain Brooks settled into the right seat, his movements efficient and practiced. "Rodriguez, I'll handle radio communications and navigation cross-checks. You focus on flying the aircraft." "Roger that," Lisa replied, though she bristled slightly at the implication that she needed him to handle basic pilot duties. Staff Sergeant David Kim, the loadmaster, called from the cargo bay. "Cargo secure. Passengers strapped in. We're ready." For departure, the passengers were a mix of scientists, maintenance personnel, and a medical team that would staff McMurdo's hospital through the winter months. 12 people whose lives depended on Lisa's ability to get them safely to the bottom of the world. "Lewis Tower, this is Polar 47, ready for departure," Lisa transmitted. "Polar 47, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds 270 at 15, gusts to 20. Have a safe flight to Antarctica." Lisa advanced the throttles, feeling the incredible power of 4 Pratt & Whitney engines pushing the aircraft forward. At 150 knots, she pulled back on the yoke, and the C-17 lifted gracefully into the grey. "Washington sky, positive rate, gear up," Brooks called out. "Gear up," Lisa confirmed, retracting the landing gear as Seattle disappeared beneath them. The flight to Antarctica would take 14 hours, with one refueling stop in Christchurch, New Zealand. For the first few hours, Lisa settled into the rhythm of long-distance flying, monitoring instruments, making small course corrections, and coordinating with air traffic control. "So far, so good," Brooks admitted grudgingly as they crossed into Canadian airspace. "Your aircraft handling is smooth." "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet. The real test comes when we get to McMurdo." 8 hours later, they were descending. Into Christchurch International Airport under clear skies, Lisa executed a textbook landing, touching down smoothly on the runway despite a stiff crosswind. "Nice approach," said Sergeant Santos from the engineer's station. "That crosswind was tricky." During the refueling stop, Lisa reviewed the latest weather reports from Antarctica. The forecast remained favorable, but the approaching storm system was moving faster than predicted. "We need to stay on schedule," she told Brooks as they prepared for the final leg of the journey. "Any delays, and we'll be flying into severe weather." "I know," Brooks replied, "but pushing the weather in Antarctica is a good way to get killed. If conditions deteriorate, we turn around. No cargo is worth losing an aircraft and crew." Lisa nodded, though she was determined to complete the mission. Too many people were counting on this flight for her to turn back at the first sign of difficulty. The second takeoff from Christchurch went smoothly, and soon they were flying over the Southern Ocean toward Antarctica. Below them, the water was a deep blue-black, dotted with icebergs that looked like white jewels from 30,000 feet. "First sight of Antarctica coming up," Brooks announced. Lisa peered ahead and gasped. The Antarctic continent spread before them, like an alien landscape, endless white ice stretching to the horizon, broken only by massive mountain ranges and crevassed glaciers. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "McMurdo Station, this is Polar 47, Lisa transmitted. "We're 200 miles out, requesting current weather conditions." "Polar 47, McMurdo Station. Weather is still favorable, winds 180 at 10, visibility 10 miles, scattered clouds at 8,000 feet. Be advised, conditions are expected to deteriorate within the next 2 hours." "Copy that, McMurdo. We'll be on the ground well before conditions change." But as they descended toward McMurdo, Lisa noticed something troubling on her engine instruments. The number 2 engine's oil pressure was fluctuating, and the temperature was higher than normal. "Brooks, look at engine 2, she said, pointing to the gauges. Brooks studied the instruments, his expression growing concerned. "Oil pressure is borderline. Temperature is climbing. We might have a problem." Sergeant Santos leaned forward from her station. "I'm showing intermittent warnings on number 2. Could be a sensor issue, but we should treat it as real." Lisa's mind raced through emergency procedures. They were still 50 miles from McMurdo, flying over some of the most remote terrain on Earth. If they lost the engine completely, the C-17 could still fly on 3 engines, but their options would be severely limited. McMurdo Station Polar 47. We're experiencing engine problems and may need priority handling for landing. Roger, Polar 47. Runway is clear. Emergency vehicles are standing by. The oil pressure on engine 2 suddenly dropped to 0. Engine failure, Brooks called out. Shutting down number 2. Lisa felt the aircraft yaw slightly as Brooks cut fuel and power to the failed engine. The C-17 was still flying normally, but they had lost 25% of their power with a heavy load and challenging approach conditions ahead. Santos, can you determine the cause of the failure? Lisa asked. Negative. Could be anything from a failed oil line to internal engine damage. The good news is we're not seeing any fire warnings. Through the windscreen, Lisa could see McMurdo Station in the distance, a collection of buildings and equipment scattered across the ice, with the runway clearly visible as a dark strip against the white landscape. There's the field, Brooks said. But look at the weather moving in from the west. Lisa turned and saw a wall of dark clouds approaching the station. The storm was arriving ahead of schedule, and they had minutes, not hours, before conditions became impossible. McMurdo, Polar 47. We need immediate clearance for approach. Weather is deteriorating rapidly. Polar 47, cleared for immediate approach, runway 07. Winds now 210 at 15, gusts to 25. Lisa began the approach to McMurdo, fighting increasing turbulence as the storm front approached. The runway looked impossibly short and narrow, surrounded by buildings and equipment with no room for error. On speed, on glide path, Brooks called out. Looking good. But as they descended through 1,000 feet, another engine warning light illuminated. Engine number 4 was now showing high temperature readings. We might lose another engine, Santos warned. Temperature is redlining. Lisa's hands tightened. On the controls, landing a C-17 on one of the world's most challenging runways was difficult enough. Doing it with potential multiple engine failures was nearly impossible. But the cargo bay behind her held medical supplies that could save lives, and 12 passengers who trusted her to get them safely to their destination. I'm continuing the approach, she announced. We're landing this aircraft. The storm clouds closed in around them like a grey fist, and the first flakes of snow began to spatter against the windscreen. At 500 feet above McMurdo Station, engine number 4 seized completely. The C-17 shuddered violently as Lisa fought to maintain control, the aircraft now flying on just 2 engines with a full load of cargo and passengers. Engine 4 is gone, Brooks shouted over the noise of alarms filling the cockpit. Oil pressure 0, temperature off the scale. Securing engine 4, Sergeant Santos called out, her hands flying over the engine control panels. Fire suppression armed. Lisa felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the frigid Antarctic air. The C-17 was barely maintaining airspeed, and the runway at McMurdo was notorious for being short and unforgiving. Any mistake now would send them sliding off the ice runway into the equipment yard beyond. McMurdo Tower, Polar 47 emergency. We've lost 2 engines and are continuing approach on engines 1 and 3 only. Polar 47, emergency vehicles are positioned. Runway is yours. Winds now 240 at 20, gusts to 30. The crosswind was pushing them off the center line, and Lisa had to use nearly full rudder to keep the aircraft aligned with the runway. Through the windscreen she could see the dark strip of ice ahead, looking impossibly narrow from their current angle. Airspeed bleeding off, Brooks warned. We're at minimum approach speed. I see it, Lisa replied through gritted teeth. She couldn't afford to go any slower, but she also couldn't add power from engines that no longer existed. At 200 feet, the snow began falling harder, reducing visibility and making the runway markers difficult to see. The storm was hitting McMurdo exactly as predicted, turning what should have been a routine landing into a nightmare approach. 100 feet, Brooks called out. Sink rate is good, but we're drifting right. Lisa applied left rudder to counteract the crosswind, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly. The C-17 was heavy and underpowered now, fighting both gravity and the Antarctic weather. 50 feet, 40, 30. The main landing gear touched down hard on the ice runway, sending a jolt through the aircraft. Lisa immediately deployed the thrust. Reverses on the 2 remaining engines and applied maximum braking. We're down, Brooks announced. But his relief was premature. The C-17 was sliding on the icy runway, the brakes struggling to find purchase on the slick surface. Lisa could see the end of the runway approaching rapidly, with a collection of buildings and vehicles beyond. Brakes aren't holding, she called out. We're going to overrun. She steered hard left, using the nose wheel to guide the aircraft toward a clear area off the runway. The C-17 slid sideways, its massive bulk grinding across the ice with a sound, like thunder. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the aircraft came to rest in a snowbank 200 yards past the runway threshold. The silence that followed was deafening after hours of engine noise and emergency alarms. Everyone okay? Lisa called out. Crew's good up here, Santos reported. Let me check the cargo bay. Brooks was staring at Lisa with something approaching amazement. Rodriguez, that was incredible flying. I've never seen anyone handle a dual-engine failure like that. Before Lisa could respond, Sergeant Kim's voice came over the intercom from the cargo bay. Pilot, we have a problem back here. The hard landing damaged some of the medical cargo containers. Looks like we've got broken vials and spilled chemicals. Lisa's heart sank. They had made it to McMurdo, but if the medical supplies were damaged, the mission would still be a failure. What kind of chemicals? Santos asked. Hard to tell. Looks like laboratory reagents. Maybe some kind of blood chemistry analysis equipment. There's a strong chemical smell. Lisa unbuckled her harness. I'm going back to assess the damage. The cargo bay was a mess. Several pallets had shifted during the hard landing, and broken glass littered the floor. But worse was the smell, a sharp, acrid odor that made her eyes water. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the medical team leader, was already examining the damaged containers. Captain Rodriguez, most of the medical supplies are intact, but we've lost some critical laboratory equipment. How critical? Lisa asked. Blood analysis equipment that the research station needs for their medical lab. Without it, they can't perform essential health monitoring for the winter over crew. Lisa studied the damaged cargo. Is there any way to salvage the equipment? Not here. It would need to be repaired at a fully equipped facility. Outside the aircraft, Lisa could hear vehicles approaching. The McMurdo station personnel were coming to unload the cargo and assess the situation. But she knew that her emergency landing would be investigated, her decisions questioned, her competence evaluated. Captain Brooks joined her in the cargo bay. Rodriguez, you need to know something. Word of your landing is already spreading. The station commander called it one of the most skillful emergency landings he's ever witnessed. But we lost critical medical equipment, Lisa pointed out. We lost some equipment, Brooks corrected. But you saved 12 lives, delivered 90% of the critical supplies, and landed a crippled aircraft in conditions that would have defeated most pilots. The cargo bay door opened, and Antarctic air rushed in like a physical blow. Station Commander Colonel Patricia Hayes climbed aboard, her face serious but not hostile. Captain Rodriguez? I'm Colonel Hayes. Hell of a landing out there. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry about the damaged cargo. Forget the cargo for a moment. I've been flying for 22 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a dual-engine failure in these conditions. You saved lives today. Dr. Morrison approached them. Colonel, we've lost some essential medical equipment in the landing. The blood analysis system that was supposed to support our winter medical operations. Colonel Hayes nodded grimly. How long before we can get replacement equipment? Not until spring, Dr. Morrison replied. The next supply flight isn't scheduled for 4 months. Lisa felt the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. She had successfully landed the aircraft, but the mission objectives weren't fully achieved. "Actually," said a new voice from the cargo bay entrance, "that might not be a problem." Everyone turned to see Dr. James Chen, one of the research scientists who had been a passenger on the flight. He was holding a tablet computer and grinning. "I've been reviewing the damaged equipment list," Dr. Chen continued. "The blood analysis system that was destroyed. We actually have a backup unit already here at McMurdo. It's been in storage for 2 years, but it should work fine." Dr. Morrison stared at him. "Why wasn't I told about this backup equipment?" "Because it was written off in the inventory system as obsolete." "But obsolete equipment is better than no equipment." Colonel Hayes shook her head in amazement. "So we actually have everything we need for winter operations?" "Everything we need," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Thanks to Captain Rodriguez getting us here safely." As the unloading continued, Lisa walked to the front of the aircraft and looked out at the Antarctic landscape. The storm was intensifying, with snow blowing horizontally across the ice. But inside the station buildings, people were safe and supplied for the long winter ahead. Brooks joined her at the window. "Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I doubted your abilities, and I was wrong. What you did today proves you belong in the cockpit of any aircraft in the Air Force inventory." "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot coming from you." "It should. And when we get back to Lewis McCord, I'm going to make sure Colonel Webb hears exactly what happened here today." The McMurdo Station maintenance hangar was a cavernous space filled with the organized chaos of Antarctic operations. Lisa stood beside her damaged C-17, watching Master Sergeant Tom "Wrench" Patterson examine the 2 failed engines with the intensity of a surgeon performing a critical operation. "Captain, this is worse than I initially thought," Patterson said, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. He had been McMurdo's chief aircraft mechanic for 8 years and had seen every type of mechanical failure imaginable. "Engine 2 has a completely severed oil line. Looks like metal fatigue. Engine 4 seized because of bearing failure. Both engines are done." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "What are our options, Sergeant?" "Honestly, not good. We don't have replacement engines here, and we sure as hell don't have the equipment to rebuild these ones. This bird isn't flying anywhere until spring." Colonel Hayes, who had been listening from nearby, stepped forward. "How long until the next transport can reach us?" "Ma'am, with the weather window closing and winter setting in, we're looking at 4 months minimum. Maybe 5 if this winter is particularly harsh." The implications hit Lisa like a physical blow. She would be stranded at McMurdo Station until spring, unable to return to her squadron, unable to prove that her emergency landing had been a success rather than a catastrophic failure. Worse, Colonel Webb would have months to solidify his opinion that she wasn't qualified for C-17 operations. "Captain Rodriguez," Colonel Hayes said, "I need to speak with you privately." They walked to Hayes's office in the station's administrative building, past windows that showed the Antarctic landscape disappearing into a white void of blowing snow. The storm that had nearly prevented their landing was now a full blizzard, with winds exceeding 60 mph. "Rodriguez, I've been in contact with your command at Lewis McCord," Hayes began. "Colonel Webb is not pleased about the current situation." Lisa's heart sank further. "What did he say, ma'am?" "He's questioning whether you should have attempted the landing with failing engines. He's suggesting that a more experienced pilot would have diverted to an alternate airfield." "Ma'am, there was no alternate airfield within our fuel range, and the medical supplies were critically needed here." "I know that, and I've made that clear to Colonel Webb. But he's using this incident to argue that you're not ready for C-17. Command responsibility." Lisa stared out the window at the storm. "Ma'am, what would you have done in my situation?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I would have attempted the same landing. You made the right call, Rodriguez. But politics and good decisions don't always align in the military. Over the next few days, as the storm raged outside, Lisa found herself in an unusual position. She was technically still the aircraft commander of a grounded transport, but she was also an unexpected addition to McMurdo's winter-over crew. The station's population had just increased by 13 people, her crew and passengers, who were supposed to be there for a few hours, not several months. Dr. Morrison approached her in the station's mess hall on the third day after their arrival. "Captain, I've been thinking about your situation. You're going to need something to do during the winter months. I'm hoping to assist with whatever operations I can, Doctor. Actually, I have a specific proposal. Our communication systems with the outside world are critical during winter. We need someone with technical expertise to help maintain and operate our radio and satellite equipment. Your flight training gives you the background we need." Lisa was intrigued. What would that involve? Daily radio checks with other Antarctic stations, coordination with research aircraft operations when weather permits, and emergency communication protocols. It's important work, and it would keep your aviation skills sharp. The opportunity was appealing, but Lisa had concerns. "Doctor, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to take a position away from someone who was supposed to be here." "You wouldn't be. Our original communications officer broke his leg in New Zealand and couldn't make the deployment. We've been short-staffed in that area since the season began." That afternoon, Lisa found herself in McMurdo's communication center, a room filled with sophisticated radio equipment, satellite uplinks, and weather monitoring systems. The center was operated by Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos, not the flight engineer from her crew, but a Navy communications specialist, who had been running the facility single-handedly. "Captain Rodriguez, thank God you're here," Santos said. "I've been pulling 16-hour days, trying to keep up with all our communication requirements." "What's the workload like?" "We maintain contact with 12 other research stations across Antarctica, coordinate with aircraft operations out of Christchurch, and handle emergency communications for the entire region. During winter, we're often the only link these remote stations have with the outside world." Lisa quickly discovered that operating McMurdo's communication center was far more complex than she had anticipated. The equipment was sophisticated, but the real challenge was understanding the unique conditions of Antarctic communication. Radio signals behave differently in the extreme environment. Satellite coverage was limited, and weather could disrupt communications for days at a time. Her first real test came 2 weeks after their arrival. A research team at a remote field camp 200 miles from McMurdo had missed their scheduled radio check for 48 hours. With weather conditions preventing aircraft operations, communication was the only way to determine if the team was in trouble. "I can't raise them on any frequency," Petty Officer Santos reported. "Either their radio is down, or they're in serious trouble." Lisa studied the communication logs and weather reports. "What about using the emergency relay station at Mount Erebus? If we can reach them, they might be able to contact the field camp on a different frequency." "Worth a try, but the Mount Erebus station has been having equipment problems." Lisa spent the next 6 hours working with various radio frequencies and antenna configurations, finally establishing contact with the Mount Erebus relay station. Through them, she was able to reach the missing field camp and confirm that they were safe. Their radio had been damaged in a storm, but they were uninjured and had supplies to last until aircraft could reach them. "Outstanding work, Captain," Colonel Hayes told her the next morning. "You may have saved lives last night." But the real validation came in an unexpected phone call from Lewis McCord. Captain Brooks, who had returned on a supply flight just before the weather closed in, had been reporting on their mission to Colonel Webb. "Rodriguez," Webb's voice was clear despite the satellite delay. "Brooks tells me you've been instrumental in communication operations at McMurdo." "Sir, I'm just trying to contribute however I can." "He also tells me that your emergency landing was exceptional pilot performance under impossible conditions. Is that accurate?" Lisa was careful in her response. "Sir, I did what any pilot would. Do in the same situation. I focused on completing the mission safely. There was a long pause. Rodriguez, when you return in the spring, I want you to know that your C-17 certification will be processed immediately. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt. As Lisa hung up the phone, she realized that her unexpected winter at McMurdo had become an opportunity rather than a setback. She was gaining experience, contributing to critical operations, and proving that her skills extended far beyond the cockpit. Outside, the Antarctic winter was just beginning, but for the first time since arriving at the bottom of the world, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 4.5 months later, Lisa stood on the observation deck of McMurdo Station, watching the first LC-130 Hercules aircraft of the spring season circle overhead. The Antarctic winter was finally ending, and with it, her unexpected assignment at the bottom of the world. The sun had returned to McMurdo after months of total darkness, casting long shadows across the ice and turning the landscape into a brilliant, white expanse that stretched to the horizon. It was a view she had come to love during her time as the station's senior communications officer. "Hard to believe you're leaving us, Captain," said Dr. Morrison, joining her on the deck. "The communication center won't be the same without you." Lisa smiled, though she felt a pang of sadness about leaving. Petty Officer Santos is more than capable of handling operations. Besides, she taught me most of what I know about Antarctic communications. "That's not entirely true," Morrison replied. "Your innovations in emergency communication protocols have been adopted by stations across the continent. The relay network you established has already saved 3 research teams this winter." It was true. During the long Antarctic winter, Lisa had revolutionized how remote research stations communicated with each other and with the outside world. Her aviation background had given her insights into radio propagation and emergency procedures that had dramatically improved safety across the continent. The LC-130 touched down on the ice runway with a puff of snow, its ski-equipped landing gear perfectly suited for Antarctic operations. Lisa felt a familiar thrill watching the aircraft land. It had been months since she had been in the cockpit of anything more complex than McMurdo's snow vehicles. Colonel Hayes approached, carrying a folder of papers. "Rodriguez, your orders came through on this morning's communication. You're being reassigned to Travis Air Force Base in California." "Travis, ma'am. What squadron?" "The 21st Airlift Squadron. They fly C-17s to every continent, including regular Antarctic missions. Apparently, someone at Air Mobility Command thinks your Antarctic experience might be valuable." Lisa opened the folder and scanned the orders. Not only was she being assigned to one of the Air Force's premier transport squadrons, but she was being given a position as an instructor pilot, someone responsible for training other pilots in advanced C-17 operations. "Ma'am, this is incredible. Instructor pilot is typically reserved for senior captains with years of experience. Your performance here has been noticed at the highest levels, Rodriguez. The communication protocols you developed are being written into official Antarctic operations manuals. Your emergency landing has been analyzed and is now used as a case study in C-17 training programs." Over the next few days, as Lisa prepared for her departure, she reflected on how much had changed since that difficult landing in March. What had seemed like a career-ending incident had instead become the foundation for opportunities she never could have imagined. Captain Brooks arrived on the 3rd LC-130 flight of the season, bringing news from the outside world and letters from her family. He found Lisa in the communication center where she was training her replacement on the systems she had helped develop. "Rodriguez, you look like you belong here," he said, gesturing at the complex array of radio equipment and weather monitoring systems. "It's been an incredible experience, Jake. I've learned more about aviation and emergency operations in 4 months here than I did in 2 years of routine flights. Well, you're about to put that experience to use. Travis Air Force Base has requested that you help develop new Antarctic support protocols. Apparently, your dual-engine failure and emergency landing are being studied by flight safety experts. Across the military, Lisa was puzzled. Studied how? Your decision-making process, your crew resource management, your handling of multiple system failures, it's all being used to improve training programs. But there's something else, Brooks continued, his expression growing serious. Colonel Webb has been relieved of command. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. Relieved? Why? An investigation into squadron operations revealed a pattern of gender discrimination. Your case was the final straw, but there were others. Female pilots being denied flight opportunities, biased evaluation reports, hostile work environments. The Inspector General's office conducted a full review. The news was shocking, but not entirely surprising. Lisa had known she wasn't the only woman facing obstacles in Webb's squadron, but she hadn't realized the scope of the problem. "Who's taking command?" she asked. "Major Chen has been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and given temporary command. She's cleaning house and implementing new policies to ensure all pilots are evaluated fairly." 3 days later, Lisa stood beside her damaged C-17 in the McMurdo hangar. Master Sergeant Patterson had spent the winter months working on the aircraft, and while it wasn't flyable, he had determined the exact cause of both engine failures. "Metal fatigue on Engine 2, just like I thought," Patterson explained. But Engine 4 was different. Turns out there was a manufacturing defect in the bearing assembly. The manufacturer has issued a fleet-wide inspection order because of what we found here. So both failures were mechanical, not pilot error. "Captain, there's no way you could have prevented either failure. And your handling of the emergency probably prevented a catastrophic crash that would have killed everyone aboard." The vindication felt good, but Lisa had moved beyond needing external validation. Her months at McMurdo had taught her that her worth as a pilot wasn't determined by others' opinions, but by her own competence and dedication to the mission. On her final day at McMurdo, the entire station gathered in the mess hall for a farewell ceremony. Colonel Hayes presented her with a plaque commemorating her service as communications officer, but the moment that meant the most came when Petty Officer Santos approached her privately. "Captain, I want you to know that watching you work this winter changed my perspective on leadership. You never asked for recognition, you just solved problems and made everyone around you better. Thank you, Maria. That means more than you know." The flight back to Christchurch was aboard the same LC-130 that had brought her replacement. As Antarctica disappeared beneath them, Lisa reflected on the lessons of the past months. She had learned that adversity could become opportunity, that competence spoke louder than prejudice, and that sometimes the most important missions were the ones you never planned for. 2 weeks later, she reported to Travis Air Force Base in California, where she was greeted by Colonel Sandra Mitchell, no relation despite the shared name, the commander of the 21st Airlift Squadron. "Captain Rodriguez, welcome to Travis. I've read your file, and I'm impressed by both your emergency landing and your work in Antarctica. We have big plans for you here." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm ready for whatever challenges you have." "Good, because your first assignment is developing a new training program for Antarctic operations. Every C-17 pilot who flies polar missions will go through your curriculum." Lisa smiled. From being denied flight certification to designing training programs, her journey had come full circle in ways she never could have anticipated. 6 months later, she stood in front of a classroom filled with experienced pilots, teaching them the lessons she had learned during that harrowing flight to McMurdo. The students included both men and women, all eager to learn from someone who had successfully handled one of the most challenging emergency landings in recent Air Force history. "The key to emergency management," she told her students, "isn't avoiding problems. It's how you respond when everything goes wrong. Your training, your crew coordination, and your decision-making under pressure determine whether you complete the mission or become a statistic." Captain Sarah Kim, one of her female students, raised her hand. "Ma'am, how did you maintain confidence during the dual engine failure? I imagine the pressure must have been enormous." Lisa considered the question carefully. "Confidence comes from preparation and trust in your abilities. But more importantly, it comes from focusing on the mission rather than the obstacles. I had 12 people depending on me to get them safely to McMurdo and cargo that people needed to survive the winter. That gave me clarity about what needed to be done." After class, Captain Kim approached her privately. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you. When I was considering applying for transport pilot training, my instructors told me it would be too challenging for someone like me. Your story gave me the courage to prove them wrong." Lisa felt a familiar surge of pride, not in her own accomplishments, but in the doors that were opening for others. "Captain, your gender doesn't determine your capabilities. Your dedication and skill do. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As evening approached, Lisa walked out to the Travis flight line, where rows of C-17s sat ready for missions around the sight still filled her with excitement, but now it also carried the weight of responsibility. She wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was a mentor, an instructor, and a symbol of what was possible when competence met opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister back in Colorado. "Saw the article about your promotion to Major. Mom and Dad would be so proud." Lisa smiled, remembering her parents who had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams despite the obstacles. They had taught her that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right. The next morning, she would be flying a C-17 loaded with humanitarian supplies to refugees in Eastern Europe. It was exactly the kind of mission she had dreamed of flying when she first joined the Air Force. But now she carried with her the knowledge that her actions could inspire others to pursue their own dreams, regardless of the barriers they might face. As she walked back to her quarters, Lisa reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From being denied certification to crash landing in Antarctica to becoming an instructor pilot, it had been a path filled with challenges, setbacks, and ultimately, triumph. They had said she couldn't fly, until she landed without power and saved not just her aircraft and passengers, but proved that excellence knew no gender. Now she was helping to train the next generation of pilots, ensuring that capability, not prejudice, would determine who belonged in the cockpit. The sky belonged to anyone brave enough to claim it and skilled enough to master it, and Lisa Rodriguez had done both.